All right, and we are live.
We are live.
Welcome back. I'm Chris.
I'm Ann, and this is
Lifestyle Business.
And we have a great show for you today. I'm a little distracted. Just check in, make sure that we actually have a show today.
We're alive.
We are. There we go. Ed's going to be joining us in a couple of seconds. So we are excited to welcome to the show Launchpad Newark member Ed Carey, the founder and CEO of Audiencetown. He's going to join us shortly to talk about how Audiencetown is turning the real estate advertising and marketing industry on its head through its custom-built platform and how their proprietary data is revealing the biggest upcoming trends in U.S. real estate.
I mean, this is going to be a real estate hot topic today.
Hot.
We were in Nashville.
We were.
Talk about hot real estate.
Hot real estate.
Wow.
We just got back from Nashville, and it was so fun. I mean, we were there for 2 days. It was a little discombobulating. We actually went to a bar.
I had to drag this one off Broadway, seeing live music. She wouldn't leave all the bands.
It was so crazy. It was like live music.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
It was super fun.
Lively, but
Yeah.
it was such a weird snapback, and we got to see all our favorites. So we got to spend some time at the EC with Clark and Sarah Mason, former community manager of Launchpad. We saw her at WeWork. Don't tell anyone. And we had a great time. We met up with our whole team, our members,
all the AGD,
our
sort of
team.
anchor member in the Nashville office.
Of course, Scott was there for us,
Yeah.
which is so fun and so amazing. Anyway, so it was a great visit to Nashville, but it was also very interesting. Ever since we've been going to Nashville, it's been like skyscrapers and cranes everywhere.
I mean, how many times did I tell people, I said we should have bought a house when we opened Launchpad Nashville? What is that, 4 years ago?
4 years ago. Every time we saw someone.
We should be playing the market.
Remember when every single time. And I do remember that we would walk to Moss Tacos and we were like, we should just buy a house on this street. And people would be like, it's hot enough. You can't afford it. It's really getting hot. And now that peak is in the rearview mirror, and it's really hot. Apparently last month they had on average 32 offers for on houses in East Nashville. 32 for one house, which is, that's a sign of a hot market.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty exciting. And, it's cool. It's like we've always talked about momentum markets. And Nashville has always been that, but it's realizing its dream.
Yeah, I mean, the big buzz around town was that Oracle is relocating their headquarters there. Lots of...
it's so funny. It's like so much excitement about it. They're like, I'm not going to bother to Airbnb my place. I'm going to give it away I'm going to get one of those Oracle folks, and they're going to need some like long-term rentals. Long-term rental was the hot. Furnished long-term was hot. Right?
But you know what Nashville has definitely accomplished. A lot of cities, mid-market cities, are like, okay, we're going to be the new Austin or the augment to San Francisco as people are relocating their headquarters, second headquarters, Amazon HQ2, that kind of thing. But that is truly happening over in the time that we've been in Nashville. Yeah. A lot of companies have opened second headquarters. Oracle's moving their headquarters there. It's amazing
I don't know
how
if they're moving their headquarters there, but they're putting a large development.
Yeah, they are.
But I mean, it makes sense, right? Highly educated, motivated workforce, great city, easy access. It's got all its roots, and good cultural.
You like seeing the momentum back in our momentum market
like
strategy. Nashville, Newark is certainly there too. But it is good to see that momentum.
All right, well, let's get going. Nobody wants to hear us yammer on about our 2 days in Nashville.
All right, I'm going to bring Ed in while you introduce him.
For those of you watching for the Harper update, the exciting thing that happened in Nashville was we
left Harper at home.
We left her at home, and she said, "I want." What did she say? Cowboy shoes, cowboy shirt, cowboy hat.
Yeah.
So we delivered on the shoes and the hat, and not the hat, but next, always time for next. So let's get going. Hi, Ed. Give me a second to introduce you, and then we'll start chatting. Ed Carey spent 20 years working for leading media, advertising, technology, data, and mobile companies, and taking the deep knowledge he gained from his time at Quest Magazine, the New York Times, Undertone, the Rubicon Project, Dun & Bradstreet, and Cargo, Ed founded Audience, a real estate advertising and marketing platform built on the realization that buying a home combines money and emotion like no other advertised product out there, and therefore requires a specialized set of technology to create an effective marketing experience. And now to tell us more about that is founder and CEO of Audience, Ed. Hey, you're right, Ed. How are you? It is so true. Buying a house is like, you have to do it in about a 3-hour window. There's a forced timeline. It's a huge amount of money that you've never done, and it's like a blind process. It is sort of archaic. We spend more time shopping for a pair of shoes than we do a house. So talk to us a little bit about it.
Hey, Chris. Hey. Yeah. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah,
we can. Yeah. Welcome.
Okay. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction. That was fun to hear the company and my resume explained back to me. Always a little surreal. Well, hey, listen, I think, hearing you sort of open the broadcast and then talk about the moving experience are all issues that we think and talk a lot about. And I think in many respects, real estate and moving has even changed since we launched the business in 2018. It's one of the industries in the United States and elsewhere that is big and hard and essential, along with education and healthcare, that is still really antiquated in many respects from how people sort of experience the process or the purchase. So the hardest things come last, right? We figured out how to automate shopping. We automated the stock market, but we haven't conquered education or real estate or healthcare. So things like COVID accelerate it. And you were talking about Nashville and the momentum markets, and of course Newark, which has been our launch pad base since the time we launched 2018. It's so true. One of the terms that we like to paraphrase is that you now have Zoom cities, and Zoom jobs. Zoom has become this sort of proverbial now adverb for the kind of life and job we have, and so much is changing. And like you're aware, where we live is very much determined by where we work, and those two, I guess, partially somewhat sort of segregated types of asset classes now have a lot more to do with each other than ever before. And of course, you're way ahead of that issue. But I think people are experiencing it in their own lives now and starting to realize, like, I actually have choice about, where to live. Where do I want to live? Do I want a house? Do I want a yard? Do I not want to live anywhere? And so it's a really exciting time to be thinking about these issues. And we, our company is it's really an advertising and marketing platform that uses a lot of data about consumers to predict who's going to move and where they want to move and why they want to move, and then we can serve them property ads that are relevant and helps them to make up their mind about where to live. And so it's our job to try to understand where people are living in the future, so that we can say, hey, if you live in, if you work for Oracle in the Peninsula, and you're being relocated to their Nashville office, like, we're going to try to know that, and then show you all the great condos in Nashville to move to. So that we try to make it our business to know who's moving and why. So it's a fun topic, and I've been fascinated to learn more about people just through where they want to live and where they want to work.
Yeah, and tell us, what is some of the data telling you in terms of like the biggest trends in remote work and where people are changing?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share sort of what the trends have been, a little bit about what our data says the trends will be. But I tell you, it's a $31 trillion question to know, what the future is. That's the size of the residential real estate market in the U.S. By the way, commercial's another 15 trillion. So these are the biggest industry in the United States and the world. Some of what seems true to all of us, either experiencing it or feeling it, is that we do have a choice of where to work and live now. I think it's still being sorted out. What things will be like in the fall, but more than ever, big companies are recognizing that they can still be productive with people working remotely to an extent. So people are now, looking at other places to live, and they want a few things. Nashville has a lot of those things. They want a really basic human need is that they want warmer weather for the most part. That's something that people do want. And if you can have it, you're going to seek it out. It's a big factor. People want warmer weather. And, I live in the New York City area, and I tell you, I want warmer weather too, and I've always been tied to a train and an office tower. And then suddenly that stops and you're like, wait a minute, why do I live here? And so people want warmer weather. Like a lot of my community in the wider Northeast, people want lower taxes. They want warmer weather and they want lower taxes, but they also want amenities, like you were talking about, cultural amenities like museums, and they want to go to a coffee shop and a cool restaurant with a nice glass of wine or something. People want those things. They want them deeply, and younger people want them even more. So, those things are a big factor. So if you can live anywhere, you're going to want to live where it's warmer and where it's cheaper. And it's pretty easy. That's what the migration patterns are telling us that people are looking to do. And if you can also, work more remotely in a Zoom city where your job is on Zoom, but maybe you travel to a headquarters once a month or something, you can start to do those things. So those are certainly the indicators. Now that's all fine and well. And we see that, one of the top real estate markets in the country is Boise, Idaho. Utah's off the charts. There's obvious places like Austin, so cool, but it's like Boise, look at Boise, Idaho. It's like a little city. It's got affordability, or used to. And a lot of people are looking at those sort of Zoom cities or smaller cities. So that's an obvious trend. And then what we're predicting is going to happen is that, when you start to look at like who's going to move in the future, though, some of the patterns are obvious, and in some cases, they also beg questions. But it's higher income people. They're the only ones able to move. If you want to move to Nashville right now, you're going to be in a bidding war with 31 other people, and you're going to pay 30% over ask. And so, who can do that? Somebody with cash. Who has cash? People who work in technology or financial services. And that's what our data shows, is that it continues to be mostly people with knowledge work, higher income. Working in industries like technology. So these are maybe not surprising things, so it will continue to be that. And that brings up other questions about what about affordability, but that continues to be a sort of the profile. It tends to be people working in technology who have families. So sort of younger family, 3 to 5 children. Mm-hmm. And they have some mobility. They're able to go into a market like Nashville and, sell a house in New Jersey for $1 million and buy pay 30 or 50% over ask in Nashville, Right. So it's people like that who are moving. Some of the interesting, our database picks up on all kinds of funny signals too. And I was just writing up something for a journalist, and I found these things too. The number one music they love is jazz. They love that way more than the average American. It's not the most loved music, but as a percentage of the U.S. Adult population, they just love jazz. Their favorite car is BMW. Huh. You see where I'm going with this? Yeah. They love running on an index. So they're 40% more likely to be runners and 10% less likely to be hunters. See where I'm going with this? Now, hunters, people who hunt for recreational activity, it's still really the U.S. population's favorite activity. Like athletic activity, I guess you could call it that. Running is less so, but the thing that people who are moving in the next 6 months, what they love to do more than anything, they love to run more than anything. So you sort of get a profile here of a kind of high income, sort of larger family moving around with a sense of mobility and maybe liquidity in order to sort of go into these markets, buy a bigger home.
It's interesting. So is it like late millennial or sorry, early millennial or late Gen X, basically.
Yeah, that's right. It's people in their late 30s and 40s.
So,
the problem, yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's interesting because, they also have homes, and you pointed out that, which is like the transfer price of selling my house in, say, San Francisco and buying a house in Nashville is significant. I have a lot more buying power. But if you are younger and you don't have a home and you've been prevented from entering the housing market because of the last sort of cycles that we've seen, are you seeing that demographic is going to different cities and maybe truly lower price cities? Or how is that shaking out?
Yeah, they're at a disadvantage if they're renting. So millennials are the biggest population, and millennials, if you don't mind me saying, they're older than we think. Those of us in our
I know they're catching up.
Family years. They're in their 30s. They're getting married. They're renting and maybe getting married for the first time, and they're a huge cohort of first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers are about 60% of the residential real estate market. So they don't necessarily have a house to sell, which is good for them. They can just go into a market with cash, but they don't have the income or the money to go in and pay 30% over ask. So mortgage rates are super low, which is great, but they're getting priced out, so they're staying renting in some cases. So you see the rental market also, climbing, and they might say, "Hey, listen, I really want to go to Nashville. Can't, the family people with, the 42-year-old with 4 kids is pricing me out, but I can get a sick apartment with a pool and a basketball court. I don't have any kids yet, so this works for me." So they're doing things like that for the most part. Again, broad generalizations, but yeah, they're not as interested in home ownership either.
It was interesting in Nashville, and these were not people moving into Nashville. We talked to a lot of people who had this whole conversation around home ownership, and a lot of them entered the market a couple of years ago when it was very, very low. And now they're like, okay, I wouldn't be able to buy my house now. But I'm going to sort of move to a new location.
They're trading up.
They're trying to trade up. Which is great, right? Like that's sort of the dream of home ownership. So some of these markets that are seeing appreciation, but it's hard to enter that market. And then we're also seeing Airbnb. And so a lot of people, we met some woman and she runs like 27 different Airbnbs on behalf of an investor in Nashville, right? And that's just a lot of housing stock that's being taken off the market and put into short-term rentals. And so are you seeing that? Do you see trends like that as well happening?
Yeah, one of the biggest is small as a percentage of housing, but a big investment category are single family rentals. So that's another option that growing up maybe wasn't available, for maybe our generations. But there are now whole businesses that basically will build and manage. They look like neighborhoods, detached homes, little yards, half an acre or something, or a quarter of an acre. Nice little 2 or 3 bedroom house. It's almost like take an apartment building and rip all the units out and put them into little plots and put a couple trees up and rent them out for $2,500 a month. So single family rental is expected to be it's only a few percentages of the residential population, but it's a big option. A lot of young people want to do that. They don't want to live in an apartment building. They want the neighborhood. They want a walkable street. They want a tree, and all that. But like they don't want to be they don't want to own a house. So that's a big one. For sure, and gives them some flexibility. And part of the problem is that older people are not selling their homes because they're kind of afraid of COVID. And this is one of the areas where I wouldn't profess to know any more than anybody else. But part of the problem is also if you're like younger and you want to go to Nashville and buy a house, you got a big family with maybe kids ready, almost on the verge of empty nesting. And they're like, you know what, I don't want to have any open houses. I don't want anybody in the house. Let's just sit and wait this thing out. So you have like older people sitting on the family housing stock, and young people can't get into it because people with older kids are like, let's just see where this goes. And so, nobody can, the young families can't buy a family house because the families are squatting in them in some sense. So they're like, hey, you go like rent something and wait this thing out. And if you sell a house, there's nowhere to move. So if you're 55 and your kids are about to graduate high school and you sell your house, you can't buy a house. So you just sit and wait. So it's really this just like logger jam, or like nothing is going. So that's sort of the disruption happening right now. And if you're someone trying to buy or sell or anything, you're gonna have a hard time doing it. And it's a problem because there's really a housing crisis in the country. People don't realize that we're about 5 million units short of what we need to house all of our citizens.
Ed, I want to talk about Audience Town specifically in a second, but
yeah,
on the housing market trends and looking into the crystal ball here, where do you think, we sort of have talked a lot on the show about COVID, obviously, and sort of this, it's one of those situations where, everybody has gone through this great reset, together, and everybody, if you haven't looked at your life over the last, 12 months, 18 months and said, okay, where do I want to be? What do I want my future to be? Do I want warmer weather? Do I want a yard? Everything you're sort of talking about your mobility, but it does seem like people are going, picking up and moving to different parts of the country. I'm curious about what your thoughts are on, New York, San Francisco, some of the, trends that 5 years ago we used to say everybody wants to be in a city, everybody wants to be downtown, everybody wants everything to be walkable. Is that going to open up more capacity in, traditional high-rise and apartment living that maybe some of the younger population will now's my shot to get into the city. The rents are down. It may not be home ownership, but what do you see, with this great reshuffling, some of the other trends, that are going to happen, looking into that proverbial crystal ball?
Yeah. All right. In the crystal ball, here's what happens. You're right. Young people continue to flock to cities, and companies keep offices with hotel desks available for them to work in. Little bit older people starting families, they will get out of the city, and a lot of retail will follow them from the cities into their house. So the gym will go from city retail location into the basement of that person.
Your Peloton and
that's right.
Stuff. Yeah.
All those things, your gym, your office, maybe your school, a lot of these other sort of retail physical locations move into your home. So you need a bigger home. And that's been certainly the trend as far as COVID has gone. Whether that continues, we'll see. But I think that's the big one. Cities remain hubs for young people. Affordability will increase, meaning it'll be more affordable to live in cities. Young people will want that, and companies will let them work there. And then you'll see cities remain certainly places where maybe executives work, maybe they're meeting spaces. But I think you're going to start to see things sort of along those lines. I was on a big video call with a bunch of investors, professional investors, the other day, watching them all pitch, and they're just all over the place. They're in Utah, Miami. I mean, nobody is where you think they were. And this is like a professional class of investor. None of these people are in a city, and I don't think they're going to want to go back. I think they're going to experience what I've experienced, where you sort of go in and out of a city, and you're like, hey, this kind of sucks. I forgot how much this kind of sucks. And so, you're going to want to stay there, work from home, travel a little bit, cities stay vibrant, more affordable. And then for people who want to have those amenities, they'll seek out smaller cities. So that's kind of it. But homes are going to get bigger. It's just, I don't know who can afford them, wealthy people. So. Right.
So that, brings up another trend. How do we solve, the affordable housing crisis? I mean, I think, the trends of, housing stock that, traditionally might have been lower income, and now, people are coming in and scooping it up, and, gentrification trends and that sort of thing is a problem, but then also just continued, development and, making sure that there's, affordable housing across the country. Cause that's where the lower end is where a lot of the housing crisis is, right?
Totally. That's exactly right. Well, I guess there's like two buckets of answers to that. One are the big external things like policy. Where can you build? What land is for sale? How do you get over not in my backyard, the NIMBY issues, regulation around building? There's obviously things like cost of lumber, which has to do with trade with Canada. And so there's things like that. what's to me is super compelling and interesting is actually like the housing product itself that could solve a lot of this stuff. So on the other, there's really cool stuff that builders like Lennar, the major builder, are starting to do, which is like multi-generational housing product. So, it's like, hey, why does my family live in Florida and I live here? Like, why don't we what if there was a house where we could like all live together, and like dad has an office, and mom has her office, and like mother-in-law lives over there, and it's all comfortable and commodious. So like the housing product gets interesting. There's like new business models of companies I'm going to forget the name of it right now. I think it's Common is one. And they're basically like ways for young people mostly, because I don't think we do it, but to like live together. So co-living arrangements through apps and stuff. Airbnb just did a big deal with a multifamily company called RealPage. So, if you really think about that, like you're not going to Airbnb for a night or 3 nights. You're going to like go to Airbnb and get an apartment for like 4 months. And that's going to replace a lease. So that's like housing product and like use of space that I think will help in a way that, government or land issues or lumber and supply issues will take longer on. So I think those are the things that I'm really interested in is, tiny houses, and like young people are like, I want a little house and I want to travel, and, I don't want to be tied down to a lease. And maybe that starts to free things up a little bit. And then insofar as actually having more units, we just need more housing stuff. I mean, that's so big and hard. It's just like, how do you do that? It's like the government and lumber and trade, but like, it's a huge, it's a big problem. But if different generations move in together, maybe that solves it, like other countries do, instead of like all having 3 houses, maybe we all get into 1 house.
Right.
So things like that, I think, interest me for the future of like, how big does a house have to be, and what does it need to do?
We talked to some people, and we're hearing people who, want to. It's hard for them to decide where they want to live. They want to live part of the year. Well, I mean, Miami tech scene. We'll see what happens to all the New Yorkers and people from San Francisco when it hits July in Miami, right? They probably want to live down there in February and back in, Hudson Valley and in the Hamptons and
I think they'll be fine
in June and July. But the whole digital nomad, like Zoom City and like everything you're talking about, those trends, those speak to increased flexibility where people, especially if you're thinking about taxes and you're like, okay, let me balance between these 2 markets and optimize some things. More people actually are not going to live anywhere all the time. Would be another trend to watch.
That's right. You just Airbnb around. It's 4 months here, right. 6 months there. And then you start having kids, and that changes things. But even so, the idea of this like constant mobility, I think. That is the big trend to watch. I mean, I think, there's the idea of like if Airbnb could just took over all of the empty apartments or, in New York City where there's a lot of surplus, especially of luxury, like, it just becomes more like hotel living. And there's a great book out, Rethinking Real Estate by Dror Poleg. And he's basically like a hotel and a condo are the same exact thing. It's just how they're packaged and marketed. So if you kind of like get in your head, you're like, oh, I guess that's right. Like, condo, 12-month lease, sign a thing. Marriott, sign a piece of paper, go for a night. It's kind of the same sort of thing. Yeah. And then actually, hotels used to just be condos, and they went from like 1 night to a week to a month. They became a condo over a few decades, and now we're kind of like going in reverse. We're like, condos will be hotels, and hotels will be condos. That stuff starts to blow your mind, but it gets to the idea of that, like how we use property is going to just change in ways that we can't even realize now.
I think that's so interesting is that there seems to be this shift, and we talked about it before COVID, right? Around, first of all, people wanting to move out of the suburbs and back into the city for this generation of the population, right? And that makes a lot of sense because you talk about all of the cultural elements and the food and the walkability and a lot of the things that when you're, locked in your suburban development is not interesting. And then COVID hits and you're like, we actually just talked to that couple who moved from Brooklyn to Oakland or San Francisco. They were going to buy a place in Oakland. They were priced out and they ended up in like a very suburban part of Northern California. And I was like, whoa, how did that happen? And they were like, I mean, we needed a house with a yard. We've got a kid. And so it was interesting because that need for more space kind of changed the trend that was moving into the city. Are you seeing trends start to pop up that like more sort of those smaller cities are starting to happen, which maybe don't have as much of like the suburban sprawl, but they also don't have that like high density downtown?
Well, I think there's the sort of a couple of things is there's sort of the smaller cities like we talked about, the obvious ones, Austin, but then that starts to turn into Boise. People wouldn't think Boise, but Boise is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country, and there's spillover from there. So there's like those cities below that city. I think you'd almost look at, I think there's, I had someone call me and ask me about like the Rust Belt cities, like the Rust Belt cities, like post-industrial cities are moving at a different pace than like some of these Sun Belt cities, And I know you have locations in all of those probably, so you might see differences there too. But like exurbs are, are hot again, places that are 2 or 3 hours away from a city. So, you can, because your house has your gym and your school and your office in it, and you can, once a week go to your Zoom city. You Zoom Monday through, Monday and Tuesday, and then you go to your Zoom city. Right.
Now you actually can live in nature, right? You can live with
yes. Yeah, and people want that, and they want a pool and all that stuff. So I think it does depend. I think there are some cities that are not having a resurgence, like might have been expected. And then you also have states who are just paying people cash to move there, like Vermont. Vermont will give you 10 grand just to move there, and I think other states are doing that too. So I don't know what like the third tier city is, but my guess is people will go there because people got to live somewhere. You can look at these. Why do people live in the desert? Why do people live on the like? People have to live somewhere, and we don't have enough housing. So you think people aren't going to go there? They're going to go there. If there's something that they can connect to culturally or office amenities.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about Audience Town and the product, and give the audience a sense of what it is and how they can interact with it.
Yeah, sure. So we're a vertical advertising platform and data management company for the real estate, moving, and home categories. So we're really a B2B software company. The team is comprised of people who have worked in digital media and advertising technology and digital ads for a long time, working with really big consumer brands and big media companies. And a couple of years ago, I thought, wow, I've learned so much about online advertising, and I've watched how consumers have really moved their lives online. One day, I should start a company in a really big industry that hasn't used all these cool tools yet. And then my wife became a real estate agent many years ago and started teaching me that, how they would do their online marketing. And it was really behind. And I met with a few people in real estate. I sort of observed that, or I learned, I should say, that real estate is unlike any other consumer product. You were just mentioning that it takes a long time to consider it. It's very expensive to purchase. It's an essential item. It's highly emotional, stressful, but also exciting. And there really, in the world of sort of digital marketing and advertising, there really wasn't a company that had really mastered that sort of consumer journey. And none of the companies in the digital ad space that I knew of were really helping the real estate industry to sort of get online in a more sophisticated, modern way. So we sort of set out to be that company, and we learned that real estate advertising is a huge advertising category, and that in fact moving is an extremely long, arduous, and expensive thing for people to go through. Of course, it's very hard just to even transact. But you also spend a ton of money on all kinds of things, from lawnmowers to ladders and mortgages and everything else. And it's just an experience like no other. So, we came up with a little slogan that says, "A home is not a bar of soap." People don't buy homes like they buy soap, and you can't advertise homes like you'd advertise soap. It's a different thing and another category of sort of consumer consumption. And so we're really we really set out to sort of understand consumers at every stage of their journey from start to finish.
And who's your ideal client then? Is it real estate companies, brokers? What sort of, I mean, and I know you probably can expand to so many different clients who are going to benefit from this service, but sort of who's your sort of core client today?
That's right. So our core client have been real estate companies. Think maybe like the marketing team at a big builder or at a big multifamily company that owns a lot of apartments. Real estate brokerages, so enterprise, not necessarily individual real estate agents, but maybe their brand would use it. Mortgage companies. And you're exactly right. What we found out is that there are a lot of companies who really want to market to people either before they move or considering moving or even after they move. We started to talk to those companies now, and that's been a big part of our growth and our forward strategy as well. But really, it's those that early adopter, that core customer, or those real estate companies that are trying to modernize their online advertising and online advertising because of COVID in many respects. Everything is just more digital, and more virtual. People are now, young people especially, I go back to those young people, those youngsters, they're actually willing to, buy homes and rent apartments sight unseen at levels that would be unimaginable to people slightly older.
Right.
So everything is digital. So we're trying to be part of that kind of revolution.
So it's just an example of software eating, real estate, another industry that's really moving online, which seems to, put you guys in a great position. I mean, you've raised a couple rounds of capital, right? And the prop tech category is hot. I mean, that's really exciting for you.
Yeah, it's been good. We've raised, we did a pre-seed and then a seed round, and then we'll be setting out to raise another round this year. It's been received very favorably. I think, investors in general, they like real estate, they like big markets, and they own real estate. And so everybody kind of knows a little bit about real estate. Everybody's moved. So it's kind of relatable. If it was like an enterprise ERP system, it's like, I don't know what that even is. But, if you're like, hey, real estate, like that's big, like, and it's changing, like it's changing. All right. I have 5 houses and I own 3 buildings. I know. So I think investors kind of get it. And early days when we were just conceiving of the business, we talked to a lot of really wealthy real estate investors, and they all loved it. And we were like, wow, these rich investors, they love real estate. They're going to like this, So yeah, we've been successful there, and we have great investors who've been supporting us and teaching us along the way too, about the world of real estate. But we've had to learn a lot along the way because of all this. We launched in 2018, it's 2021, and half of our life has been spent, company life has been spent during COVID, and so much has changed. So we think we sort of learned from it, and we can be part of the future and not tied so much to real estate behaviors of the past.
Would you say that COVID, obviously, health and social and societal challenges aside, just from a pure startup standpoint, just all of this shuffling of the deck of real estate that we're talking about and accelerating the move to people being able to wanting to do it virtually versus, the physical process that, sort of the old process, has that been a net positive for the business?
Yeah, very, very much so. I think there's 2 facets. One is sort of the consumers want to experience everything digitally, looking at houses. We invented something called a virtual tour ad. So you can actually like tour a house from an ad unit and everything. So consumers want to experience everything digitally and virtually. I'm not really going to fly to Nashville to check out. I'm just going to just get me the video, walk me around. I get it. It's pretty nice. I like that house.
Yeah.
And then just on the sort of industry side of it, like you were talking about, it's just a pain to buy a house. And so there are a lot of companies trying to like automate just like the whole transaction process, where you're not dealing with paperwork and like phone calls. And I mean, I bought a house a year and a half ago, and I moved, and it was just, I think my lawyer and I had 59 emails, just on stupid stuff. So it's so manual, it's so analog. So that a lot of companies just try to make the process of moving more automated and easier, kind of like buying stuff on Amazon. I think that becomes the benchmark for everything. A pair of shoes on Amazon, but people also want to buy a house or rent an apartment the same way, just like push button, super simple. And so that's how consumers want to experience moving. And if moving were easier, more people might move. And so that's another, it might unlock mobility in ways that it's such a pain to move right now. You're just like, I don't want to do it. But imagine you could just be like, this stinks. I don't want to live here. Imagine you could sell your house to a technology company in 48 hours and move. There's companies, called iBuyers looking to do stuff like that. So you just move, But on our side, being digital certainly helped because we were basically like, look, consumers are all online. They're consuming more internet media even before COVID. It's startling, but the average American spends like 11 hours a day with content. I mean, it's scary, but it's true. I mean, we're on it right now. We're on a screen. Right. So that consumption went up. So it definitely helped our story. We're just like digital everything, digital discovery, digital transactions. Everybody just wants to press buttons and move, so we're part of that. But yeah, we had scary times. My last day in office was 2020. I was in Launchpad, Newark. It was like March 10th. We like went for lunch across the street down there, across from that the Marcus Samuelson restaurant. We're having some food. So one of our guys like, I think there's this like pandemic or disease or something going around. We're like, yeah, whatever. I don't, who cares? 2 days later, it was like, hey, you better come home. We left all of our stuff at the Launchpad, screens, the bags. Just walk. I was like, I'll be back in a week, and never, I think I went back 8 months later, with like a hazmat suit on and picked up my monitor from Launchpad Newark. And we're like, hey, and we're just now starting to like, re-enter the office orbit and figure out what's next for us. But it was, we got to go all digital, and I didn't see any of the team members for, 8 months from that time.
Yeah, It's it's amazing what a run everybody's been through, and it's nice that you're coming back and people are coming back. It was really fun to be in Nashville and give some fully vaccinated hugs to other members.
I know, so much fun.
Actually high five people. There was that felt pretty good. We'll be excited to come to Newark.
We're on our way to Newark.
Months too.
Yeah, it feels like things. I'm here. I'm actually talking to you from Midtown Manhattan right now, and that's been one of the neighborhoods that gets cited as just post-apocalyptic dead zone. But people are out and about. There's people in the train station. People are wearing masks. People are out and about. I just had lunch with a friend, and there's clearly people having business meetings. So, I don't want to do it every day. I don't even want to do it 3 days a week. Maybe not even 4 days a week. Maybe not even every week, but like you want this to be here. And while working from home has its merits, so does seeing colleagues, especially building startups and growing companies. You have to be together. So it's good to feel life kind of returning, but still a measure of safety, sort of around.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Which is, may not want it every single day, but you certainly do want the energy that comes from that convening.
And I think people want to return to work on their own terms, right? It used to be your employer's terms. Hey, you're going to be in this office 5 days a week. Now everybody's like, no, I'm able to get a lot done over Zoom. I want to come in 2 days a week, or I want to, come in for my meetings and, networking and that kind of thing. So it is a big shuffling of the deck.
My move would be like, I'm going to be there between 10:30 and 1, and then who wants to go to lunch?
Totally. Well, I think one of the lines is like, the office needs to become a consumer product. It has to be really nice. Like, it has to be pretty. It has to have coffee. It has to have beer. Launchpad has both those things. Oh. So, it has to have, things like, I want to go. This is fun. This is nice. I don't want to go to a 1980s office park off the highway. Like I did that. That stinks. Like, it has to feel like I want to be here, and I want the interactions to be valuable. And I want to see people I don't see, and I want to hang out with the boss, and I want to, go get some drinks. And like, that's what it has to be. That if you're just going there and plugging in and doing Zoom calls and going home, you're like, this is a waste of time. So the office needs to become a consumer product in some ways, and it has to be really great, otherwise people will opt out.
That's a good way to describe it.
It's a really good way. And I think we've seen a lot of that here, certainly in California, where we have, Silicon Valley and the desired workplace, right? And having it to be somewhere that is fun, but it still felt very campus. And so what we can do is learn from those companies and be like, okay, great. What does the convening space of the future? Because it's not necessarily a bunch of cubicles, right? And it doesn't have to be a huge campus, but it's a place that we all come together, we gather, it fosters creativity, it fosters engagement, it fosters those connection points. And I think it's going to be exciting.
Yep.
More phone booths too.
More phone
booths for sure.
More phone booths. Phone booths and couches and meeting rooms and no desks. It's going to be that.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Ed, it was so great to catch up. We'll see you when we're in New York next, hopefully. And thank you so much. All right.
This was fun.
All right.
Thanks, Chris.
All
Thanks,
right.
Ann.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you for coming. Do you want to do the wrap up there?
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us today. To all our Nashville members, so great to meet you and spend time with you this week back in Launchpad Nashville. Again, we'll look forward to seeing Ed and many other Newark members here in the next couple months.
You're a little off screen. Let's do the promo for Bruce. It's framed up.
All right.
Argyle's laughing. She agrees. All right.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to be back next week with Bruce Katz, a legend when it comes to understanding the value of and profoundly influencing the economic viability of cities in our continuing theme on the future of work. And he's going to rejoin us after a year to share his thoughts on how COVID-19 has transformed urban life over the past 18 months and what that means for the future of cities across the U.S. We are so excited to welcome you back, Bruce.
All right. But until then, you can catch up on all of the past episodes by subscribing right below or above, wherever the button is, on the LPTV programming channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to Ed, Carey, and our producer, Ariel, and everybody for joining us this week. And we'll see you next week.